You know what's fascinating? We've been lied to our entire lives about how success really works. Right now, while you're watching this, someone less qualified than you is getting that promotion you deserved. Someone with fewer skills is closing deals you couldn't. Someone less talented is building the empire you dreamed about. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. They're not succeeding despite playing dirty. They're succeeding because they understand something you don't. Something Niccolò Machiavelli figured out 500 years ago that still makes people uncomfortable today. Because while everyone else was writing fantasy novels about how princes should behave like saints, Machiavelli looked at actual successful rulers throughout history and asked one simple question: what did they actually do to get and keep power? And what he discovered will completely shatter everything you've been taught about success, morality, and winning in life. So let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. How many times have you been the nicest person in the room and watched someone else walk away with everything you wanted? How many times have you played by the rules while someone who bent them got ahead? How many times have you been honest, transparent, and kind, only to finish last while people who were none of those things finished first? This isn't some motivational speech where I'm going to tell you to be more ruthless or to stab people in the back. This is about understanding the real mechanics of power, success, and human nature. Because here's what Machiavelli actually understood. The world doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards results. And the gap between those two things is where most people's dreams go to die. Let's start with something Machiavelli said that sounds absolutely brutal at first. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Now, before you click away thinking this is about becoming some corporate villain, stay with me, because this isn't what you think. Machiavelli wasn't saying, be a monster. He was making an observation about human nature that is as true today as it was in Renaissance Italy. When someone loves you, their support is conditional. It's based on emotions, and emotions change. They love you until they don't. They support you until it's inconvenient. But when someone respects your boundaries, your standards, your ability to follow through on consequences, that's not emotional. That's rational calculation. Think about your own life right now. Who do you really respect? Is it the boss who's everyone's friend, but never holds anyone accountable and lets the team fall apart? Or is it the leader who's fair but firm, who you might not grab drinks with, but who you know will have your back and push you to be better? Here's what's really interesting. Machiavelli isn't talking about fear in the sense of terror or abuse. He's talking about respect through strength. He's talking about people knowing that you mean what you say and say what you mean. That when you draw a line, it actually means something. That your words have weight because they're backed by action. Look at the most successful people you know personally or have studied. I'm not talking about the motivational speaker version of their story. I'm talking about how they actually operate day to day. They're pleasant, often quite charming, but there's steel underneath. You know instinctively that there are certain things they simply won't tolerate. They don't need to yell or threaten. They've established through consistent action that their standards aren't negotiable. And here's the paradox that Machiavelli understood. This actually makes people more comfortable around them, not less, because uncertainty is what really creates fear. When you know exactly where you stand with someone, when their boundaries are clear and consistent, you can relax. It's the people who are unpredictable, who say yes but mean no, who avoid confrontation until they explode. Those are the people who actually create toxic environments. Now let's talk about something even more controversial that Machiavelli wrote. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is where people really misunderstand Machiavelli and think he's advocating for being fake or manipulative. But that's not what he's saying at all. What he's observing is that reality and perception are two different things, and in the arena of success, perception often matters more than reality. Let me give you a modern example. You work harder than anyone else in your office. You're first one in, last one out. You're solving problems, hitting deadlines, going above and beyond. But you're quiet about it. You think the work should speak for itself. Meanwhile, someone else who does half the work you do but talks about it constantly, sends updates to leadership, makes sure everyone knows what they're working on, that person gets promoted. Are they better at the job than you? No. Are they better at the perception game? Absolutely. And here's the thing that Machiavelli understood that most people do not want to accept. Nobody is going to do the deep investigative work to discover your true value. They're going to judge you based on what they see, what they hear, what reaches their attention. So you have a choice. You can rage against this reality and insist that your work should speak for itself while other people get the opportunities you deserve. Or you can understand that managing perception isn't being fake, it's being strategic about making sure people actually see the value you're creating. Think about it this way. If you create something amazing but nobody knows about it, did you really create value in a practical sense? If you solve a huge problem but the decision makers never hear about it, does it help your career? Machiavelli isn't saying lie about your accomplishments. He's saying that being good at something and being known for being good at something are two completely different skills, and you need both to succeed. Here's another Machiavellian principle that makes people uncomfortable. The ends justify the means. Now, this phrase has been twisted to justify all kinds of terrible things throughout history. But in context, Machiavelli was making a much more nuanced point. He was saying that when you're evaluating a decision, especially a difficult one, you have to look at outcomes, not just intentions or methods. Let me give you a concrete example from business. You're running a company and you have to lay off 10% of your workforce to save the company. If you don't do it, the entire company goes under and everybody loses their job. It's a horrible decision. It's going to hurt people. But the alternative is worse. Do you make the hard call that hurts some people now to save everyone's jobs in the long run? Or do you avoid the pain, keep everyone employed, and watch the whole company collapse in 6 months? Most people optimize for how they feel making the decision rather than the results of the decision. They choose the option that lets them sleep better tonight, even if it leads to catastrophe tomorrow. Machiavelli is saying that's backwards. Judge decisions by their results, not by how they make you feel when you make them. Now here's where this gets really practical for your life. Think about the difficult conversations you're avoiding right now, the employee you need to have tough feedback with, the relationship that isn't working that you need to end, the boundary you need to set with a family member. You're avoiding these conversations because having them feels cruel or uncomfortable or confrontational. But what's the long-term result of avoiding them? The employee never improves, and eventually you have to fire them anyway. The relationship gets worse and worse until it ends explosively instead of gracefully. The boundary violation continues until you're resentful and bitter. Was it actually kinder to avoid the short-term discomfort? Or did you just choose your own comfort over the better long-term outcome for everyone involved? And if you're finding value in this different perspective on success and power, do me a favor right now and hit that like button. It actually helps more people discover content like this that challenges conventional thinking. And subscribe, because we're going to keep exploring these uncomfortable truths that actually make a difference in real life. Drop a comment too and tell me, have you ever been in a situation where being too nice actually held you back? Where playing by the rules cost you an opportunity? I read every comment, and I want to know if these Machiavellian insights match what you've actually experienced in your career or business or life. Now let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of Machiavelli's philosophy, the idea of flexibility and adaptability. Machiavelli wrote extensively about how successful princes had to be like both the fox and the lion. The lion represents strength, courage, the ability to fight and defend. The fox represents cunning, the ability to recognize traps, to be strategic and adaptive. Most people are one or the other. They're either the aggressive person who tries to power through every situation with force and dominance, or they're the clever person who tries to think and maneuver their way around every obstacle. Machiavelli observed that the most successful leaders were both. They knew when to be the lion and when to be the fox. They could be strong when strength was needed and subtle when subtlety was required. In your own life, think about how you approach challenges. Are you always trying to go through obstacles directly? That works sometimes, but other times you're just smashing your head against a wall that has a door around the corner. Or are you always trying to be clever and indirect? That works too until you face a situation that just requires you to stand your ground and fight. The key is adaptability, the ability to accurately read a situation and choose the right approach. Sometimes you need to have the direct confrontation. Sometimes you need to be patient and strategic. Sometimes you need to compromise. Sometimes you need to refuse to budge an inch. Rigidity is weakness. The person who only has one mode, one approach, one strategy, they're predictable and therefore easily defeated. The person who can shift modes based on circumstances, who can be hard or soft, direct or indirect, aggressive or patient depending on what the situation requires, that person is dangerous in the best sense of the word. Here's another Machiavellian insight that is incredibly relevant today: the idea that it's dangerous to be neutral. Machiavelli observed that when there's a conflict between powerful forces, trying to stay neutral and friendly with both sides often ends with both sides eventually turning on you. Why? Because neither side trusts someone who won't commit. Neither side values someone who tries to play both sides. Each side would rather have a committed enemy they understand than a supposed friend who might flip at any moment. Think about this in modern terms. In your company, there's a power struggle between two executives. You try to stay neutral, friendly with both, not taking sides. What happens? Neither of them really trust you. Neither of them includes you in their inner circle. And when one of them wins, you're not rewarded because you weren't really on their team. Or think about it in terms of values and principles. You try to be everything to everyone. You shift your opinions based on who you're talking to. You avoid taking strong stances because you don't want to alienate anyone. The result? Nobody really knows what you stand for. Nobody sees you as a leader. Machiavelli isn't saying be unnecessarily divisive or combative. He's saying that strength comes from commitment, from being willing to take a position and defend it, from being known for something specific rather than trying to be all things to all people. In today's world, this is more relevant than ever. Everyone is trying to build a personal brand that offends nobody and appeals to everybody. The result is blandness, mediocrity, forgettability. The people who actually break through are the ones willing to plant their flag somewhere specific. Let's dig into something really practical now. Machiavelli's advice about generosity and resources. He wrote something that sounds almost cruel. A prince must not worry about the reputation of being miserly. What he's observing is that leaders who try to appear generous often end up either bankrupting themselves or having to eventually exploit people even more harshly to fund that generosity. Think about this in personal terms. You're the person who always picks up the check, always helps everyone out, always says yes to lending money or resources. You want to be seen as generous, as the good guy. What happens? First, you drain your own resources. You can't invest in yourself, can't build your own foundation, because you're constantly giving everything away. Second, people start to expect it. Your generosity becomes the baseline, not something special. Third, when you eventually have to say no because you've got nothing left, people resent you for it. The lesson isn't to be selfish. It's to be strategic about generosity, to give from a position of strength, not desperation to be liked, to invest in yourself first so you have something real to offer others. Think about successful people you know. The truly successful ones aren't endlessly giving away their time and resources to anyone who asks. They're strategic about it. They invest in relationships where it's mutual. They help people who will actually use that help to improve. Here's something Machiavelli observed that's especially relevant in modern workplaces. People respect those who challenge them more than those who constantly agree with them. He noted that princes who surrounded themselves with yes men always got bad advice and made poor decisions. In your career, think about this. Are you the person who always agrees with the boss? Who never pushes back or offers a different perspective? You might think this makes you valuable and loyal, but what it actually does is make you replaceable. Anyone can nod and agree. The people who become indispensable are the ones who add unique value through their perspective, who are willing to respectfully disagree. Obviously, there's a balance here. You can't just be contrarian for its own sake, but when you genuinely see a problem, or have a better idea, suppressing it to avoid conflict doesn't make you a team player. It makes you someone who prioritizes their own comfort over the organization's success. Apply this to your friendships and relationships too. Your real friends aren't the ones who agree with everything you do. They're the ones who will tell you when you're making a mistake. Now let's address the elephant in the room. You might be thinking, isn't all of this just advocating for being manipulative or ruthless? Here's what people miss about Machiavelli. He wasn't writing a moral philosophy. He was writing a practical manual about power and effectiveness. He was describing how things actually work, not how we wish they worked. Understanding these mechanisms doesn't mean you have to use them for evil purposes. In fact, it means you can defend yourself against people who are using them against you. Because while you're busy being naive about how power works, other people are studying it and using it. You can choose to understand these principles and use them ethically. You can be strategic without being manipulative. You can be strong without being cruel. You can manage perceptions without being fake. But you can't succeed by pretending that power dynamics don't exist, or that everyone is playing by the same fair rules. Let me give you specific, practical applications you can use ethically right now. First, understand that reputation is an asset that must be actively managed. If you're doing great work, make sure the right people know about it. This isn't bragging, it's communication. Second, recognize that not all relationships are equal. Invest more time and energy into relationships with people who reciprocate, who add value to your life. Third, understand that sometimes you have to make decisions that feel bad in the moment but lead to better outcomes. Don't optimize for being liked in the moment. Optimize for results. Fourth, develop both your direct and indirect capabilities. Be able to confront problems head-on when needed, but also work around obstacles strategically. Fifth, stand for something specific. Stop trying to appeal to everyone. Sixth, manage your generosity strategically. Help people from abundance, not scarcity. Seventh, be willing to disagree respectfully when you have a better idea. These aren't about being ruthless, they're about being effective. Here's a really important concept: the role of fortune versus capability. Machiavelli talked about luck and skill as both being necessary for success. Some things are outside your control, but how you respond to circumstances, how you prepare, that's within your control. You can't control whether your industry is growing or shrinking, but you can control whether you're developing valuable skills. You can't control whether you meet someone who could change your career, but you can control whether you make a good impression. Most people believe either everything is luck or everything is within their control. The Machiavellian view is more nuanced. Develop your capabilities to the maximum so that when opportunities arise, you're ready to seize them. This focuses your energy where it matters, on things you can actually influence. Let's talk about adaptation and change. Machiavelli observed that people and organizations that refuse to adapt to changing circumstances fail. The successful people he studied were able to recognize when their approach needed to change and actually make that change. Think about your own life. How many things are you doing simply because that's how you've always done them? How many beliefs do you hold because you formed them years ago under different circumstances? Most people keep using the same playbook over and over, even when it's clearly not working anymore. The world changes, technology changes, culture changes. What worked yesterday might not work today. Are you adaptive enough to recognize this? This doesn't mean abandon your values. It means be flexible in your methods while staying true to your goals. Be willing to admit when something isn't working anymore. Rigidity feels safe because it's familiar. But in a changing world, rigidity is the most dangerous thing. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Machiavelli wasn't teaching evil. He was teaching realism. He was saying, stop believing in fairy tales about how the world should work and start dealing with how it actually works. Success doesn't go to the most virtuous person. It goes to the most effective person. Power doesn't flow to the most deserving person. It flows to the person who understands how to gain and keep it. You can rage against this reality, or you can understand the real dynamics at play and use that understanding to actually achieve your goals. The people who are already succeeding around you already understand this. They're managing perception. They're being strategic about relationships. They're making hard decisions. They're adapting to circumstances. They're playing the actual game, not the imaginary one. So you can either catch up and compete on the real playing field, or you can keep insisting the game should be different while they keep winning. The world rewards effectiveness, not good intentions. It rewards results, not effort. And if you found this valuable, tell me in the comments about a time when being too nice or too idealistic actually cost you something. Because everyone who's actually trying to accomplish something eventually runs into the gap between how we're told things work and how they actually work.